I've always been interested in where my family came from, and with sites like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, it's a lot easier than ever. In today's episode of the I Can't See You podcast, I'll talk about my family origins, and I've got a couple of other small things to share as well.
From Studio C, welcome to the I Can't See You podcast with David. He can't see, but he's got a lot to say and a face for radio.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 85 of the I Can't See You podcast. My name is David, at David Benj on all the socials. I really appreciate you joining me for today's episode. And did you guess what episode 85 is going to be titled? Not the title of the actual episode, but 85 is the Ocho Cinco episode. Dan, I think you probably got that one. And I'm sure you've probably had that guy on your team over the years. I know I had him on my team and he got hurt, which is usually the story of my life with fantasy football. But thanks again for joining me for today's episode. I've got a couple of things to talk about today, and I'll get to the main part in a minute or two. But first, a couple of smaller things. I know that over the past few weeks and months, I've been talking about small businesses and how they've been so decimated by the coronavirus, where they either can't open or people just can't get to them. They have to do, if you're a restaurant, you've got to, most places you can't, people couldn't come into the restaurant. They had to either do takeaway or dine outside. One of the companies that I want to see do well and survive is the White Cane Coffee Company. And I wanted to just get this blurb out there for a couple of reasons. I want them to survive. It's a very good company with a very great cause. Erin Willman founded it to help people who are disabled have a sustainable job. She is blind, and she has a few disabled folks that work for her, and they have great jobs. They're able to do the job, and they need your support. And who doesn't like coffee? They've got a lot of great coffee blends and a lot of great coffee flavors. The Colombian Supremo is outstanding. If you like a little bit more caffeine like I do, and it's mid-afternoon or late afternoon and you need something to get you through the rest of the day, try their high octane. They've got a sample pack for $20 that will get you a few different blends of coffee in there, so you can see which one you like, whether it's those blends I mentioned or the donut shop or breakfast blend. And again, it's for a great cause. It will help these folks in Warren, Pennsylvania, maintain their jobs. And, with the way things are today in the business climate, it's so difficult, and I really want to see them survive. The second point, and the reason I'm mentioning White Cane Coffee, and they were on an episode in the last couple of months. I'll link to that in the show notes. I am an affiliate for White Cane Coffee Company. That's not why I am talking about them today. Again, I want them to do well. But not only am I an affiliate, but the Keystone chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania is an affiliate. So if you use my link, ican'tseeyou.com/coffee, that will take you to the White Cane site, and you can make your purchases, and the Keystone chapter of the National Federation of the Blind will get a commission for that. So it's their affiliate link. They'll get paid a little commission for any purchase you make. So you're kind of helping two things in one. You're helping the Keystone chapter, which I am the treasurer of, and you're helping White Cane, a small business from Warren, Pennsylvania, survive. And we all want to see that. And I haven't been in contact with them for quite a while, White Cane Coffee, but they're good people, and I really want to see them survive. So again, ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. Remember, I can't see you sounds like a whole sentence, but it is only 7 letters. ican'tseeyou.com/coffee, and that will get you to the White Cane Coffee website. And please make some purchases. Right now, they're running a special. If you spend $50, you get free freight. And again, they've got a lot of great coffees, flavored coffees. I have not tried the flavored coffees, but I can tell you that the Colombian Supremo and the High Octane are very nice. And I do have some others that I will be trying shortly because I'm going to try them a couple of different ways. But give them a try. Again, ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. to help both White Cane Coffee Company survive and put a little money in the Keystone chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania's bank account. That would be greatly appreciated. And again, if you have any questions about that, please reach out to me, whether it's at 646-926-6350 or ican'tseeyoupodcast@gmail.com. And if I can't answer that questions you may have, I will pass them along to Aaron or Bob, and they will be able to help you out. Again, White Cane Coffee, it's great stuff, and it's an even greater company to help folks with disabilities stay employed. The second thing I wanted to talk about today, and I know I've mentioned this in the past with hearing things like Jacob typing on his keyboard, and I usually record the podcast when he's not around not because I'm afraid that you will hear it on the podcast. It's distracting to me. I don't use a script and everything is in my head. And if I hear something that distracts me, I will lose my train of thought, and then the podcast goes completely down the tubes. And we don't want that, right? So last night I was going to bed, and I walked into our bedroom. Liz goes to bed about 5 hours to 6 hours before I do. And I walked in and I hear this weird noise. Now, the way our apartment is set up in this building, this condo building is set up, there is one HVAC system for the entire building. It's all water-based. So each bedroom has a heater/air conditioning unit, and then our living room has one. And it's basically called a fan coil unit. So, it's not run on a thermostat. We basically turn it off or on when it gets hot, cold, whatever. Well, the units, I found out a couple of weeks ago when we were having trouble with one, are the original units from the building. They are from 1969. So when I walked into our bedroom last night and I hear the unit running, but I hear a weird noise, I'm like, oh no. I thought this one is going bad and we're going to have to replace it. And it's probably around $10,000 to $15,000 to replace. They have to be custom fitted because no one manufactures them in a set size anymore, or it might not fit exactly. Again, buildings from 1969, I guess back in 1969 you could get it and you could order them and they were easy to be had. But now, to be safe, you've got to get them someone from the company to come out and measure to make sure they get it exactly right so it fits where the current one is fitting. So I am so worried when I walked in and I hear that noise, so I go over and I shut the unit off. And when I hear the sound continue, and now I know that it's not coming from that unit, I kind of breathe a sigh of relief. But then I am fumbling around the bedroom trying to find this sound because I have no idea what it is. I've never heard it before. And, it's dark. Liz, of course, is sleeping and she's going to get up in an hour or so. And I'm just listening for this sound. And I'm, I can't see to begin with. And now it's a dark room and, there's stuff, we have drying racks where we dry our clothes. We have those things up. And I am just looking for, feeling around for what this might be. And finally, I turn on a light, and of course that wakes Liz up. She's like, "What's the matter?" I said, "Don't you hear that sound? I don't know how you could sleep through that." Well, it turns out last night when Jane was going to bed, she wanted to take her temperature. She felt warm. She was looking for the thermometer that we have here, couldn't find it. Last year, I had bought one from the National Federation of the Blind's Independence Market down in Baltimore when I was down there. And it's a talking one because I couldn't see the numbers on the one that we had. So I thought, oh, here, I'll get this talking one. It'll be great. And I won't have to guess what my temperature is if I have a fever or not. Well, the one that it was just a piece of junk. It never was great. It always made a funny sound when it was on and the person was talking, and it was a very computery sounding voice. It was programmed backwards, so if it said your temperature, let's say you had a temperature of 98.6, it would say 98.6 Fahrenheit degrees instead of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or just 98.6 degrees, because there was no other way. You couldn't change it to Celsius. So I don't know why it didn't just say 98.6 degrees. Well, it hasn't worked right over the last few weeks, and Liz was messing with it to see if, she could use it to take Jane's temperature, or so Jane could take her temperature. And I guess had done something, and it was making like this tweeting noise. It was, I don't know how Liz slept through it, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to fall asleep. And it just made me start thinking of, am I sensitive to sounds, or is it just because, it was just so quiet and I really heard that. And, as I've gotten older, I've wondered, do I have something else wrong with me? I've always heard pretty well throughout my life. I could hear things, and everybody said, oh, it's because you can't see, you can hear better. Now sometimes when somebody says something to me, I'm not 100% sure I heard them right. And, I'll get into it a little bit later when I talk about the main thing today. If we're looking to move somewhere and we're going to move overseas, how am I going to learn another language? Because I can barely understand English at this point, but yet I heard this noise last night, and I hear other things, when I'm watching TV, I hear things out in the hallway or things upstairs or whatever. And, or things in the kitchen that, I'll ask, Liz or Jane or Jacob, hey, do you hear that? And they're like, no. And I'll get up and I'll listen to what it is and I'll figure out it's this or it's that. So I don't know I don't know what the answer is there, but it just reminded me of that. And, I just thought it was funny that, Liz was able to sleep through this noise. And again, was it crazy loud? No, but it was loud enough that I would have fixated on that and not been able to fall asleep. Now, maybe it started, and it most definitely started after Liz went to sleep, so maybe it wasn't enough to wake her up. But when she woke up with her alarm, I thought, her alarm is quieter than that noise was, so how did that work? So I don't know, but I just thought that was funny, and I thought I'd share that with you. The main thing that I want to talk today about is genealogy. And I've always wondered, since I was little, where my grandparents were from, on both sides, both my mom's side and my dad's side. My dad's side, I knew they were from somewhere in Eastern Europe, whether it's the Ukraine, it's Poland, it's Russia. All the census data from back in the day when they were alive, it said Russia on there. But I can't find any kind of, passenger list with them on it. I can't find anything else basically with them on, other than maybe, I think with my grandfather, with his name was Benjamin, it's my middle name. Maybe a death certificate or something like that. With my grandmother, who died when my dad was 4 in 1922, almost 100 years ago now, I can't really find anything. Not sure of the spelling of her maiden name. Her maiden name was Leitner. I've seen it spelled Lightner, and I've seen it Leitner. So I can't really find anything, and I'm trying, part of the problem I think is, when they left Russia, their last name was Valinsky, Valinsky. When they became U.S. citizens in Philadelphia, when they got off the ship, for whatever reason, their name was changed to Goldstein. And, not that I think Valinsky is a great name, but I have never liked Goldstein. I've never liked it. I mean, if you notice, when I start the show and end the show, I never use it. I don't like it. And, maybe it's a Jewish thing. Maybe I don't like it because it's so Jewish. I don't know. I just have never liked it. And it kind of bothered my dad. And I always thought if I was ever, and I always wanted to be on TV or radio, I always wondered, what would my last name, what would my stage name be? Everybody has, I watch 6ABC in Philadelphia. I watch that news for whatever reason. I'm not quite sure because I see the news all day long on the internet. And The guy, his name is Jim Gardner, and that's his stage name. His last name is like Goldman or something like that. So I often wondered what would I pick as my stage name, because I wouldn't go by Goldstein. I just knew I wouldn't go by Goldstein, and so I don't know if that's the issue with them. But I can't find anything else other than, a couple of small things here in this country. Nothing from, when they landed. And part of the problem could be, my dad said to me that he was told they landed in Philadelphia. And, maybe the ship didn't land in Philly. Maybe it landed in New York or Baltimore. So once I go through and I found a place to look at passenger lists, maybe once I go through them, I'll be able to see. And I know that they came over with a friend whose last name was Spilker, and it was Spilker in Russia, and it was Spilker here. So the fact that his name didn't change, if I could find what boat that guy was on, then I should be able to find my grandparents on that side. So, that is not that I've put that on the back burner. It's just been frustrating over the years to try and find something on my dad's side of the family, and of course, since my dad died over 8 years ago now, and even towards the end, he didn't remember some things, and it was always a little fuzzy because, again, his mother died when he was 4, so he didn't really know her too well. And, certainly some of the stories from her, he probably didn't remember even then because again, she died when he was 4. So anything was, he heard secondhand from, one of his siblings, and there were other siblings, that he was very close to, and some, they were all close to begin with. Even once my grandfather remarried a few years later, he was close to the 2 kids that my step-grandmother have. And again, I didn't meet any of them. My grandfather died when my dad was 18, and I don't know when the step-grandmother died, but I know my dad thought she was okay, didn't love her, but didn't hate her. So I don't know too much about her at all because there's no blood there, and it's hard enough finding enough on my grandparents, let alone a step grandparent that I really don't care about and has no blood, and really wouldn't be helpful with anything. So I've often wondered, where they're from exactly. And I know, for example, there's a city or a town in Ukraine called Volinsky. Could that be where, sometimes that's how a last name was gotten, because that's where they're from. More than likely it is from Russia, but close to the Polish border, because there was an area, a section of land in that area where, 1 minute it was Poland, 1 minute it's Russia, back and forth and things like that. And I actually read up on it a while back, so I thought that was interesting, but I want to see where that is. More recently, though, as we've considered moving, as I talked about a couple of weeks ago, I have been posting I'm in a psoriatic arthritis group on Facebook, and, I was looking for ideas, where would a good spot be to move? I want to move to where it's warmer. Folks in that group suggested to stay away. We were thinking about Gulf Coast, Southeast Atlantic coast. Again, I want to be near a beach. Liz wants to be near, water, and she's okay if it's a lake. I just want to be near a beach. So, we considered, again, Gulf Coast, Southeast Atlantic coast, which, primarily means Florida. I guess we could look in Georgia. But after going on that Facebook group, everybody said, well, you know what, there's too many storms. Every time the pressure changes or the difference in the humidity, when the humidity is bad, it's all that stuff is bad for the joints. And, after reading that and trying to figure out as things change during the summer and days when I feel great and days when I feel crappy. I've kind of seen that, and I realized, okay, maybe they're not the places. And, some other people said, maybe you should check out the Mediterranean coast in, Italy and France and Spain. So with Corona, of course, we're not going anywhere. And including, like I said last week, the NFB convention was in Houston, supposed to be in Houston this year. So, we would have gone to check out the Gulf Coast beaches while we were there. And we probably would have done that even if I knew about the psoriatic arthritis stuff, again, because still want to go to the beach. And, so when these folks said, check out like the Mediterranean coast where there's less, less storms, 300 days of sunshine, so forth and so on. Humidity is, typically a little bit lower. So when I started doing that and I started looking to see where we might want to go, I've always had a thing for France. Pardon me, I'm not sure why. But I also know that somewhere along the lines in my family, my mother's father's side is from Spain. And so I thought, well, maybe we'll look in Spain as well, for that reason and for others. The one thing Spain has over France and maybe even Italy, and I haven't really looked too hard into Italy only because for whatever reason, I'm just not as interested. And if you listen to us when we watch Food Network and Giada's on and she's saying all those different Italian cooking words and I mimic her, Jane cringes when I do that because she's like, why are we watching Giada with Dad in the room? Because I will just start saying, because if you watch Giada, she always says it, because she's Italian, she always says it with that Italian pronunciation. So I will go around and start just using those words all throughout the day, even though it has nothing to do with what may be happening. So as time has gone on, and I thought, well, wait a second, if we want to move and there's a chance of some sort of Spanish history, maybe we would qualify, to get, on the short track to get, dual citizenship in Spain, where we could have a Spanish passport. So whether we live in Spain or France or wherever, it's a lot easier traveling throughout the EU than if you're on an American passport, for example. Now, if you're on an American passport, you're not getting into Spain or Italy or any of those places because, it's shut out to the U.S. If you had a Spanish passport, of course, you'd get in. One of our Keystone Chapter members has a dual citizenship with Poland, and she told me a few weeks ago that she's going to Poland. I'm like, how are you going to Poland? You can't get in. She said, I have a Polish passport. And I said, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense because then you show up as a Polish citizen when you're going to Poland, and it's a lot easier to get in, even though you may have to quarantine. And again, I don't know how it'll work. And she's supposed to be leaving in the next week or so. So it'll be interesting to see if she actually is able to go. So I've started to look in more to my mom's family. And again, the Hernandez side. And again, a lot of people, when they see someone that looks like me, say that I'm Hernandez or I have a Hernandez tone, they kind of think, oh yeah, this guy's full of it. But I'm not. And it's funny as I look through and see my great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother. My great-grandmother, by the way, her name was Tomasa Lopez. She was born and lived in Cuba and then came to the U.S. Her husband is the one from Spain. His name was Florentino Hernandez. But I haven't been able to find out a lot. It does not look like he obviously went from Spain to Cuba. But I can't see that he ever came to the U.S. So I'm guessing he died in Cuba. But I haven't been able to find out a lot about him, and that's been disappointing. I'd like to get some sort of birth record or, baptism certificate that, some of them are easy to find. Some are not. The only thing that I found on Florentino is he is listed on a death certificate to my grandfather's brother. So I guess my great uncle, who died back in 1938, who through 23andMe I've connected with a person named Pat, who is I guess a second cousin. Her grandfather, this guy that I was just mentioning, her grandfather, his name was Charles. And my grandfather, who's took the name of Roy, but his name was Rogelio, Rogelio. They were brothers. So our grandfathers were brothers. So I've been trying to find this out because, if I can, I found something online that said, hey, if you have grandparents or great-grandparents that were Spanish, you may be able to get, in 1 year, Spanish citizenship. And again, I would, still be a citizen of the U.S., just want to do it to have that second passport. And again, be able to, in times where an American can't get in someplace, we'd be able to get in. But it's just been so interesting, and going back and forth with Pat, and she was saying, yeah, I went, I've been, putting off doing housework because I've been looking into this, and it's just so interesting to go back and see, and see names like Tomasa Lopez and her mom. So my great grandmother Ana Lopez, or Anya. Don't know if the end's got the little squiggly on it or not. And, to see the Cuban and Spanish stuff, it is just, to me, is so cool. And to find, if I ever do, and I, at some point I will, I'm sure, because it's out there, there's records, and that brings me to the part of what does this have to do with not being able to see? Well, here's what it has to do with. Most of the documents from back in the day, because computers weren't around yet, are handwritten, and they are like photocopies of photocopies of photocopies. So, that combination has made it almost impossible to see actual documents. And like I said, with the passenger list, looking into my dad's side of the family, it's going to be almost impossible for me to read that if I ever can actually open the files that I need. So somebody's going to have to help me, whether it's Liz or one of the kids. And that's frustrating to me because I usually do that stuff. I usually look into that, when everybody's asleep and, nobody's up. And, so it's so hard to get through that when you can't see what you're looking for. And again, same thing on the other sites that have some information. One site that I've been using, besides using Ancestry and 23andMe, and 23andMe really just shows your makeup and, has DNA matches, doesn't, you can't really go back and, find out information about, ancestors who've died long ago. But there's a place called FamilySearch.com, which is free, and it's a pretty comprehensive site, and that's where I found a lot of things. And again, my cousin Pat told me, and she used it a lot to find some things out. And the great thing is they will show the document, the actual document. For example, finding my great-grandfather's name on a document was a death certificate for my grandfather's brother's death. It lists, mother's name, and then it says Tomasa Lopez, and then it says father's name, Florentino Hernandez, mother's place of birth, Cuba, father's place of birth, Spain. And, and then it lists some other things, about this guy. His name was Charles, like I said, and it shows what cemetery he's buried in. And I found that Tomasa Lopez seems to be buried, if it's the right Tomasa Lopez, seems to be buried in the same cemetery. Looks like she died in 1920. And from what I've seen, it also looks like she came to this country sometime from 1900 to 1903, which is around the time that, my grandparents, my dad's parents came to this country very early 1900s, from 1900 to 1903. So what's a little confusing to me, my grandfather on my mom's side, my mother's father, I've seen him listed as born in Cuba, and he always told my mom that he was born in Cuba. But on his death certificate, it says Key West, Florida. Now, I don't know the actual, I can't remember off the top of my head, and I haven't looked him up in a while because I've been more focused on Florentino. But looking up Roy, I believe Roy and Charles were only a year or two apart, and I believe Roy was older than Charles. Charles was born in 1895 in November. So if Roy is, even if he's a couple years younger, and like I said, I think he's older, that would put his birth sometime in between 1892 and 1897, give or take, again, depending on, I think Charles was younger. But that would put Tomasa Lopez in Cuba, which means my grandfather was born in Cuba. So I just have to keep looking. And, I always thought that it would be cool if, he was Cuban and there'd be a way. And I said this even way back when I was in middle school, that someday we would be able to travel to Cuba. And again, I've always liked the beach, and I always thought, wow, it'd be great to be able to go there. And, maybe you can, and I'm sure a lot of folks who left Cuba, under Castro, during the Mariel boat lift in 1980 and stuff like that, I'm sure they can't wait to try and get back home when, things change. And, I know Castro's not the thing anymore, but, where things really open up. And, now with the virus, who knows what's going on. But it would be very cool if both if my grandfather, Roy Hernandez, if he was Cuban, I think would be awesome. But looking at my DNA makeup, I only show, a very small part of what would be part of the Cuban, blood, and it's only about 3%. Meanwhile, my Spanish is like 18%. And while we're talking about percentages, my Ashkenazi Jewish is like 48%, almost 49%. So, while my dad always thought I wasn't Jewish enough, my DNA says otherwise. It's just been very interesting looking through and trying to find it. But like I said, I'm going to have whether I hire someone to help me out and get to that final step to see where was Florentino from, where was Roy from, and again, Roy at this point, really, it doesn't make too much of a difference. But I just want to know, and it just seems if Tomasa Lopez came to this country in 1900 or later, and Charles and Roy and any of their other kids, and I don't know any of the other siblings of my grandfather, if they were born in the 1890s, then, and she didn't come to the U.S. until 1900 or 1903, whatever it is, to me that means that, they've got to be Cuban. And I keep thinking about that too. Would I be good at making cigars or what? And I guess that's a stereotype. It just makes me think of the Seinfeld episode. And and I guess if I can make cigars, maybe someday I can make sushi too, even though there's no Japanese. So it's just very interesting. And I don't know if you've looked up where you're from and how difficult that was, because my parents had me when they were older. I was born, my dad was 47. And my mom was 36. It put all my grandparents' birth dates in the late 1800s, from my grandfather Ben somewhere around 1878 or 1880, to my grandmother Pauline, who is my mom's mom, and she actually she definitely was born in this country and is of British and Irish descent. So as you can tell, I am a pretty big mix, and I do have a pretty large number of British and Irish makeup in my DNA, and I don't remember the number off the top, but it was less than Spain, but more than just about everything else. And funny enough, there was also a good chunk, around 9%, French and German. And again, not sure which side that comes from. We were happy, and I was happy. I don't know if my mom was happy. Before she died, a year or two before she died, we got my mom one of those 23andMe kits, and she did that. So it's kind of how I've made some of the connections. The connection to my cousin Pat was initially she reached out to my mom's account, which my mom, of course, never looked at because she didn't own a computer or know how to use one. When I responded, I said who I was, and then, we made the connection and we started emailing. And over the course of the last couple of years, Pat and I have emailed back and forth, and doing doing Ancestry DNA that I did recently, I did it because Pat had said another one of my cousins, in fact, a first cousin named Rosemary, was over on Ancestry DNA, and, we have the same grandfather. We don't have the same grandmother because my grandfather was married twice. Rosemary's grandmother was his first wife. And again, like I said, my grandmother Polly, or Pauline, but her friends called her Polly. She was the second wife. And that, even though I was around and my lifetime and Roy's lifetime, overlapped, it was only by a year or two, and I never met him. I never met Roy Hernandez, which is kind of sad that, not that I would have remembered it at this point. I do remember my grandmother, Pauline, because we went to visit her. She died when I was 8. I remember going to the funeral, and I remember, wow, she was born in 1895. Wow. And, it was a big deal to me because that was probably the only person I ever met that was born in the 1800s. And I later found out, maybe at that time it was, but, some other friends, like that guy Spilker I was telling you about, who was a friend of my grandfather's, he obviously was also born in the 1800s. I want to say 1885 from what I've seen, give or take. So it's just been an interesting journey and trying to find out, like I said, more on my great-grandfather Florentino, and whether that helps or not, I still think it's very cool to learn. And as I keep going with it, hopefully I'll find more, and I'll bring some updates on that. But family has always been a big thing. It seems like for both sides, both my mom's and dad's side, even though my mom left home when she was 19 and came from Tampa to live up here, we still kept in contact with. She still kept in contact with her sisters and brothers. So it's just been like I said with my dad. My dad was close with all his siblings, and most of them had died before I was born. And in fact, he had a twin. Who, oddly enough, he wasn't a twin. He had a twin brother and sister that was both born and died before he was born. I think they were born in 1916 and died in 1917. And every time we go to the cemetery, we look for their plots to see more about it. I believe the sister, the girl's name was Pauline, which is kind of funny that there's Pauline on both sides, and the brother's name was Morris, I believe. So it's just been an interesting journey. And again, hopefully I'll find out where my paternal grandparents are from and figure that out. And then, of course, find out more about Florentino, who from all accounts, seems like it's the Canary Islands, which I'm not against going to the islands. And again, as we look and think about looking where we want to be, the thing that leads me more to Spain, besides the fact that I might be able to get something done there because of my heritage, it's just warmer there. And, in the winter, in France, for example, the temperatures still get pretty chilly into the 40s. Even in Nice and Marseille and, along the Mediterranean coast there. So, so that's one reason why I would also pick Spain over France. Again, I just have a thing. I've just always had a thing for France. I don't know why. Took French in school. Don't really, as the saying goes, I know un peu, which is a little. And, my Spanish is limited to donde está el baño and some things like, and no habla. So obviously I'd have to learn that if we move somewhere. Have to learn a language anywhere. But so that's what's happening. It's not going to happen anytime soon, obviously, with everybody being locked down again, it seems, or travel restrictions, whatever. But it's just been very interesting to me, and I'll leave it at that. And again, I would appreciate if you do want to check out White Cane Coffee Company, iCan'tSeeYou.com/coffee. I do appreciate you listening to the Ocho Cinco episode of the I Can't See You podcast. Again, reach out to me if you have any questions or comments or show ideas. My friend Max Ivy just released a book, so I'm going to have him on in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if it'll be next week or a following week. And we've got some other guests we're trying to line up, so we have them in the future. But again, I do appreciate you listening today. Give us a call to give me some ideas or questions or comments, whatever you got. Area code 646-926-6350. Or if you don't want to leave a message that's 3 minutes or less, you can certainly email ican'tseeyouPodcast@gmail.com. Remember, I Can't See You is only 7 letters, though it sounds like an entire sentence. And again, thanks again for listening. Stay safe, stay cool, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the I Can't See You podcast. Follow David on Twitter. He is at David Benj.